Welcome into the AllSunDevils podcast. Millard Thomas and Donnie Druin joining you today. We're here to talk some ASU versus Stanford after the beatdown. It wasn't a total beatdown. I mean, they won 28-10. They definitely left some points on the board, though. But Donnie, I first want to start with the defense today because the defense for ASU looked pretty good on. I almost said Saturday night. It was Friday night. Tyler Johnson absolutely dominated that game. I believe he was named Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Week as well. He was definitely called Walter Camp National FBS Player of the Week. So he's got a couple awards to his name this week. He went off in that game. The pressure, the front seven for ASU was really good. The defensive backs for ASU was really good. Down Chase Lucas. Overall, great performance by the defense. Donnie, what was your biggest takeaway from Saturday's game from the defense?
Oh, man, just
Friday's game. Excuse me. I keep saying Saturday.
Same thing, man. Everybody knows already. It's been a long week for both of us, so I don't think anybody will complain. Friday, Saturday, they're expected to win both, and they have won on both of those days in the week so far. But focusing on the Stanford game really quick, man, I mean, not enough credit has been given to that Stanford team. I mean, they played their third straight ranked team in a row whenever they traveled to Tempe. They played some really tough football teams, and I just don't think people kind of really appreciate like how solid of a football team they are. I don't think they're Pac-12 contenders by any stretch of the imagination, but I mean you can never really count those guys out, especially this year. I mean, and just focusing, on the defensive performance, like you said, Tanner McKee, Stanford quarterback, walked into that game with 0 turnovers to his name, and ended the night with 3 interceptions. I mean, I'm looking at the box score right now. Stanford had 13 net rushing yards on the day. I mean, they were unable to really get anything going. I mean, they were 11th in the Pac-12 in rushing yards per game going into it. So we kind of figured that ASU would try to make them one-dimensional by stopping the run on early downs, forcing them to throw. And throw Stanford did. I mean, Tanner McKee attempted 45 passes, threw for 356 yards. And I got to say, even though they lost 28-10, I feel like McKee made a handful of really good throws throughout the game, especially just like down the seam, the middle of that secondary, the middle of that defense, right in a sweet spot behind the linebackers, right in front of the safeties. I feel like McKee did a really good job attacking those areas. But all in all, the bend but don't break defense for Arizona State was phenomenal. Millard, they crossed the midfield line 11 times, came away with 10 points. Crazy, absolutely crazy. Phenomenal job by ASU's defense. And ASU, on the offensive side of the ball, sure, they didn't score 30 points a game like they normally would have. I mean, they got close to 28, but when you have a phenomenal defensive outing like that, I think you can get away with scoring 14 or 17 points and still feel comfortable about walking out of a stadium with a victory like that.
Yeah, and it was a defensive effort where they were able to generate pressure, but they didn't have to bring 5-6 guys. On their 2 sacks in the first half, they only did 4-man pressures, and they were just doing a lot of different stunts, a little different personnel groupings. And Tyler Johnson was the man Friday night. He had 3.5 tackles for loss. He had 2 sacks. He was even credited with a forced fumble in this game. He's now 4.5 sacks away from cracking the top 10 in program history. So Tyler Johnson definitely making some waves. And when you looked at Tanner McKee, like you said, it was bend but don't break. That offense was able to cross midfield multiple times. They were able to get in ASU's territory, but every time they got in ASU's territory, ASU either had a big sack or maybe it was just a penalty by Stanford where they made a mistake. So they weren't helping themselves, and ASU did a great job of helping themselves. But really the key from this defensive game was, I think, the secondary, because down Chase Lucas, you would think that would be the weakness for this defense. And McKee, like you said, did have some success. He had over 300 yards passing, but that boy Jack Jones was basically baiting him the entire game, it seemed like. He had 1 interception that we have to talk about because it was absolutely wild. I mean, he picked it off, then he tossed it to, I believe, in my opinion, I think he tossed it on purpose to DeAndre Pierce.
He did. He confirmed it after the game, yeah.
Okay, because I just watching it, that's what I thought in real time. He tosses it to Pierce. Pierce scores it for a touchdown. Jack Jones almost had another pick later in that game where it just kind of bounced off his hands. He couldn't corral it. I thought he had a really strong performance. He got like mossed earlier in the game for the touchdown, kind of moss, where the guy would just basically big-bodied him and caught the ball over him. But after that, he responded very well. I mean, he absolutely dominated the game Friday night. And when you can put that kind of performance on opposing quarterback while not having one of your top 2 cornerbacks, while still missing a couple guys in your front 7. I mean, it was a very impressive performance by this ASU defense. And basically, since that BYU game, this defense has been humming, and I'm really excited to see what it can do heading into Utah. I mean, how good, if you were ranking this defense in the Pac-12 South, do you think maybe ASU has the best defense, or at least is playing the best defense right now of those teams?
I would say so. And Millard, I think, there's a really strong argument that you can make that case for the entire Pac-12. I mean, these guys, they don't let you move the football in big chunks consistently throughout the game. They're, one of the best run defenses. They tout one of the most experienced and most talented secondaries within the Pac-12. I mean, they allow very few points per game. I believe it's only 16 right now, if I remember the number correctly. Just a lot of really good numbers to back up their play. And they've got talent at almost every position. And they've got depth too, like you've already pointed out. Jermaine Lole out for the year, Trevez Moore out for the year, and there's been guys that stepped up on that defensive front time and time again. And Kyle Swelly, who was suspended for the first half of Friday night's game versus Stanford due to that targeting call, freshman linebacker Eric Gentry comes in and looks everything like you and I specifically before the preseason thought that he would, because we had him listed as one of our freshman top picks for AllSunDevils heading into the 2021 year. So, and then just even the secondary, like you said, Chase Lucas out, Jack Jones is not a problem. I'm going to step up. I'm going to limit these guys and just, continually be there play after play. Evan Fields, who wasn't there for the UCLA game, came back and, made his presence felt versus Stanford. And I think top to bottom, right now they are playing like the best defense in the Pac-12.
And one guy I kind of want to highlight who I think kind of got lost in this game, I think really made a huge impact on defense outside of Jack Jones and Tyler Johnson. I think Jordan Clark played a really strong game because his closing speed on some of those plays where it seemed like he's 7 yards away from the opposing offensive player, and then it would be bang, bang. He would get there in a second and a half second. Jordan Clark's closing speed in that game was absolutely ridiculous. He was able to get one interception off a tip drill. He was able to make some big hits over the middle as well with that closing speed. I thought Jordan Clark was really impressive, and he was probably someone that I was kind of surprised with in that game because he's kind of a redshirt kind of guy. So we haven't seen a ton of Jordan Clark in his career, but he's really stepped up this season. But I kind of want to move the conversation a little bit and talk about the offense, because this was an interesting game for the offense. It kind of felt like they were just, in my opinion, playing with their food. I felt like they were just kind of joking around and having fun. They felt like they knew they could beat this team whenever they wanted to, and they were doing that early. They scored on their first 3 possessions, touchdowns on their first 3 drives. But after that, the offense didn't put up 1 point in the second half. So when you look at this game, does that worry you at all that this offense didn't score in the second half, or you're just like, this team was way better than Stanford, and once they went up 21-7, they just went with their normal ground and pound game and just put this game away?
So it was odd, but I mean, just watching that performance and obviously just watching all of the other games as well, I think if you had to really nitpick one, I don't want to say bad, but kind of downside to this team, there's no killer instinct, right? There's no ability to grab the ball left with 5 or 6 minutes and really just take away all momentum, go down and score. It just keep teams out of the picture. I've never once felt, actually, I take that back. The second part of the fourth quarter versus UCLA, they did a really good job kind of playing keep away. But really, other than that, ASU has really struggled to really distance themselves offensively. And like you said, they were playing with their food. And, I think that's the difference between good and great teams. Great teams leave you no opportunity to come in the back door and still make it a game. Good teams, they're good. They're still going to win by a couple possessions, but it still really feels like for a lot of the game that your opponents are going to be in it. And I felt the same way versus Stanford. The game was not over by the time the fourth quarter got underway. And granted, like I said earlier, Stanford is a pretty damn good football team. But Arizona State, you're a ranked team. You're one of 2 ranked teams in the Pac-12. You're now expected to basically at least go to the Pac-12 championship at worst with the team and with how you've performed already. Those are the kind of games that you pretty much need to put the nail in the coffin, and that's not what we saw on Friday night.
Yeah, I'd be pretty upset if this team didn't make it to the Pac-12 championship. This is the second time they started 5-1 under Herm Edwards. So we've seen the bottom fall out before after a hot start, but I have a feeling this year might be a little bit different, partly because I think ASU is good. Second part, because I don't think the Pac-12 South is that scary. We'll talk about that Utah matchup coming up, but there was a moment in this game late in that fourth quarter where they kind of tried to go for the kill shot with around 8 minutes left after that turnover on downs by Stanford. You had that big play drawn up. It was like first or second down to Gian Porter. And Jaden Daniels just kind of overthrew him. Like the dude was wide open. It would have been a walk-in touchdown, but Jaden Daniels just kind of overthrew him. And there was a couple of plays like that where Jaden Daniels was a little bit off. I don't think this was the greatest passing performance by Jaden Daniels. I think he was probably better as a pure pocket passer the last couple of weeks, but still, we still got to see the legs. I think he had over 70 yards rushing in this game. In that first quarter, he had a 51-yard touchdown where he pump faked, made a man miss, and then basically went untouched 51 yards to the end zone. So we still saw a lot of big things in this game, especially from that ground game. Once again, ASU goes over 200 yards. They're now 11-1. Under Herm Edwards when they rushed for 200 yards. So another dominating performance there. But we did see a little trickery in this game. We saw a flea flicker. We saw an end around that scored Elijah Badger a little touchdown. I think he has 2 touchdowns, only 4 touches this year. So really good efficiency. Is the trickery something you expect more of from ASU as we go down the stretch? Because I think ASU really likes to do all this misdirection, just keep you on your toes. Like they're not trying to be a vanilla offense. They know they may not always be able to just move the ball effectively every time. You know, you can't always just run and ground let me start over. You can't always ground and pound the ball every position. Yeah. Sometimes you have to take your deep shots. Sometimes you have to work over the middle of the field. And I think what this ASU offense is doing with motion and misdirection, I think it's something we could see a lot from ASU during the second half of the season.
Yeah, just really quick. Speaking on the performance of Jaden Daniels, I feel like it was a really Jaden Daniels-esque game, right? Like he wasn't asked to do a whole lot. They didn't tell him go out and throw for 400 yards. It was a classic, hey, we're gonna lean on the run game. You just don't turn the ball over, but you still make some plays with your arm and we'll be good to go. And I feel like that's exactly what we saw from last Friday. But kind of moving forward, yeah, I feel like offensive coordinator Zach Hill has done a really good job of putting his, chess pieces in the right places to succeed. I mean, we've seen wide receiver Ricky Pearsall run, catch, throw. I'm pretty sure he might kick an extra point sometime down the season too, with everything that he can do. Obviously, like I said, Elijah Badger, 2 touchdowns on 4 touches is crazy. Earlier this week, Herm Edwards said he reminds him of a Brandon Ayuk whenever he's in the open field with the ball in his hands. I think it's the highest of compliments, especially coming from a guy like Herm Edwards. Big fan of Zach Hill and what he's brought to ASU since he's been here for the last couple of years now. I really feel like it helps keep the offensive balance because obviously ASU loves to run the ball, and defenses, they can kind of creep up if you run the ball a little bit too much with those tendencies. But on the same hand, if you think that what ASU is going to do, you're pretty much going to be wrong almost every time. And just to point that out, the wide receiver reverse that Elijah Badger scored on, they ran a variation of that same exact play the very play before. They almost a carbon copy of that wide receiver reverse. They ran the play before. So, Zach Hill is not afraid to be creative and dial things up. And I think that's paid dividends for ASU so far.
And shout out Zach Hill's former school, Boise State, for taking down BYU over the weekend as well. ASU took a L to BYU earlier in the year, so it was nice to see BYU take a loss to Zach Hill's former team. But there was, I think, another positive from the offense in this game. Only 5 penalties. This team has been trending downward since that BYU game in penalties. They've been playing a lot cleaner football, which I like. But we did see probably the biggest negative of the season from the running back group because Chip, for the first time this season by ASU running back, fumbled the ball in the second quarter. It was the first of his career, but I'm sure you're not worried by that. I'm not worried by that. Running backs fumble. When you're going to touch the ball 15 to 20 times a game, it's going to happen. So we're not worried about that at all. ASU keeps chugging along with the ground game. But coming up against Utah, I think this is going to be another game where ASU is going to lean heavily into their ground attack because the Utah Utes aren't the best team at stopping the run. They're 63rd in the nation in stopping the run, allowing 147.5 yards per game on the ground, while ASU is crushing 214 yards a game on the ground. 20th best in the country. What kind of game are you expecting ASU versus Utah? Is this the biggest game, the biggest test of the season for ASU so far?
Millard, I like you a lot because you asked a really hard question. you don't really skid around anything, so I do appreciate that about you. I think given everything we've seen out of this team, going into UCLA, they were looked at as underdogs, right? Like everybody kind of, if they lost to Bruins at the Rose Bowl, I don't think a lot of ASU people would have been like super angry, disappointed maybe, but not like very, very upset. I think now that we know what this team can do, they're 5-1. They control their own destiny. We've seen what they're capable of. I think so. I think this is the biggest game because this Utah team last week goes into the Coliseum and beats USC for the first time ever at the Coliseum. And granted, I know there's not a whole lot of hot stuff going around at USC right now, but still, those are 4- and 5-star kids through and through. So for Utah to go and do that, fairly impressive. But on the other side of the token, they haven't had any like really big convincing wins versus really solid opponents. They dropped the game to BYU a week before ASU went, and almost by a very, very similar scoreline, and then dropped I believe it was a home game to San Diego State, 33-31, just a week after. Utah's weird. They're a physical team. They're always going to be one of those teams to watch in the Pac-12 South. I do think this is going to be the biggest game ASU plays to date, and I think it's going to be one of those like weird, grimy, slow-paced games, man. I really do, especially considering the weather. I think it's supposed to be super cool there in Utah on Saturday night, and obviously we've seen 2 vastly different ASU performances on the road this year when you look at BYU and when you look at UCLA. Utah's a tough team, and I think it's more so of which ASU team shows up as opposed to which Utah team shows up, because obviously the SunDevils look to be the more superiorly talented team on paper, but like you and I both know very, very well, paper, the football isn't played on paper. It's played on the field, and they got to go out and they got to win that game themselves.
Yeah, and really the only difference between those 2 games to me was really just the penalties, because I felt like it would have been a similar score in that BYU game if they didn't just keep shooting themselves in the foot. So if they want to beat Utah, they're going to have to clean that up. But the weather is an interesting factor. You're going to have the high altitude in Utah, which can affect those guys, oxygen levels, I guess. I'm no doctor in case you guys didn't know, but it makes me wonder if it is like a rainy, kind of a sloppy kind of weather environment. I feel like that might play into ASU's hands. Of course, Utah might be more used to that environment, but again, it's college football. It's not like those guys have been there for 7 years. It's not like it's Tom Brady in New England that understands, or Aaron Rodgers in Wisconsin. Like a lot of those guys are going to be freshmen, sophomores, juniors that have been there for 1 to 3 seasons, maybe 4 seasons. But if it is that kind of mucky, muddy kind of game, maybe that helps ASU. Like we've been saying for the last 2 years, 3 years of ASU, this is a ground attack team. And if the way to win this game is to just hand it off 45, 50 times, best believe ASU is going to do that. I don't think they're scared, but I do want to see how ASU responds in this game, because entering that ASU versus UCLA game, it was a lot of put up or shut up time for ASU. Are you a real contender or you're a pretender? And in that UCLA game, they stepped up to the plate. They showed us they were contenders. They went to the Rose Bowl and absolutely dominated UCLA. But now they got to do it again, because as we keep saying, the mark of a true contender is consistency. And so to be consistent, you got to win the games you're favored in. And it's not like Utah is some dominating force. They're 3-2 on the season. Yes, they beat USC, but again, USC pretty soon might have a litany of former NFL coaches they could choose from Urban Meyer to John Gruden if they want. Like they got a lot of candidates right now in the head coaching portal. So ASU, I think this has to be a game they win. I mean, like we were saying, this is the second time they started 5-1 under Herm Edwards. So we've seen the bottom fall quickly before, but ASU right now is healthy for the most part. Their offensive weapons are healthy. Their quarterback's healthy. There are, a couple of nicks in the defense, but overall, if you could get Chase Lucas back potentially for this game, have you heard anything about the status of Chase Lucas for the next matchup for ASU?
I think the status around him right now is hopeful. I don't think there was anything kind of deemed in one way or another. Not exactly, what's the right word for it? Not exactly like in good light that he didn't go back into that game. Whereas you saw like DJ Davidson, for example, he got hurt nicked up a little bit in that game, but he ended up going back. So I'm sure throughout the week and as we get closer to game time, we'll have a better idea. Although I will say ASU does a really good job of not letting that kind of stuff leak out and then leaving it right up until the players are literally on the field warming up for us to find out whether or not they're actually going to play.
Yeah, that's good. Keep them guessing. You don't want your opponent to have any inside advantage. So if you could keep that injury report hidden an hour until game time, that's a big key for ASU. And I think turnovers is going to be another big key in this game. ASU has been one of the best turnover teams in their last 17 games. They actually lead the nation. I get these stats off SunDevil Athletics. Don't worry, guys. I'm not doing this research myself. Shout out SunDevil Athletics for giving these stats. But over their last 17 games, dating back to 2019, they have the most takeaways in the nation. So this is a team that's running 200 yards down your throat, and then they're forcing the ball 2 to 3 times a game on average. Like, if a team is going to do that, how can you stop this ASU team? I think they have to stop themselves. And going against Utah, Donnie, I want to hear your predictions. I don't even know. Is the game Friday or Saturday night, Donnie?
Saturday night. Yep, Saturday night, 7 p.m. Arizona time.
All right, so we got to do this. We started this trend last week. I got to keep it going. Give me your predictions for ASU versus Utah.
I mean, I think it's going to be somewhat of a close game. I really do. I don't want to discount Utah playing at home, especially since, we're still not 100% sold on ASU and what they can do, at least on the road this year. However, I just think the SunDevils are too talented. I think they've learned from their BYU mishap the first time. I don't think they let that happen a second time. I got the SunDevils winning 27-17.
Okay, and right now it feels like ASU can kind of dial up a deep shot whenever they want. It feels like they get 3 to 4 opportunities a game where they have a dude running 50 yards wide open down the field. So because of that, I think the offense is still going to be good in this one, regardless of the weather. If it's mucky, you hand it off 50 times and you get 300 yards from your running backs. Right. If it's a clear sky kind of game, then let's throw missiles all over the field with Jaden Daniels. I still respect the fact that we're going on the road to Utah. So I still give the Utes some advantage there, but I'm going to say 32-21. ASU takes care of business right now. They're, I believe, number 18 in the AP poll. And Donnie, with another win potentially Saturday night, I'm already forecasting the W, I guess. How high do you think? Speaking into existence, call me LeVar Ball. How high do you think ASU could climb in the AP poll? I'm a big Lonzo fan, Donnie, so I'm all in on the Ball family. I might put a little wager down on Lonzo, most improved All-Star. I might do a little LaMelo Ball MVP. But Donnie, AP poll, ASU, they're 18 right now. How high can they climb with the win against Utah? Can they crack that top 10? It's possible.
Oh, man, it definitely is possible. I don't think they can get in with a win this week. I feel like a lot of stuff would have to kind of fall in their way. A lot of dominoes would have to go in that direction for ASU to climb into the top 10. I definitely think if they beat Utah, they move up at least 1 or 2 spots. Texas is playing number 12 Oklahoma State. Maybe Texas is looking to bounce back from that. Auburn hosts number 17 Arkansas. Maybe something can happen like that. Number 11 Kentucky plays the number 1 ranked Georgia Bulldogs. So obviously anything can happen. Along those lines, Tennessee hosts number 13 Ole Miss. The list goes on. Obviously, all of the ranked teams, for the most part, will be playing. So college football, especially this year, has been super crazy. You never really know what to expect. I found that out during the Texas-Oklahoma game last week. I had a little bit of money on that. I'm not going to say if I won or lost, but I definitely was not in the positive after that game. But you live and learn. College football, super crazy. Arizona State, I do believe if they win, they'll have to move up at least 1 or 2 spots in the rankings, regardless of what else happens, right?
Yeah, I feel like they have to. I'm looking at the rankings now. I'm glad they put Florida behind ASU. I like seeing BYU too behind ASU. I think ASU is going to win Saturday. I think they're going to crack the top 15. There's still some undefeated teams ahead of them, like Coastal Carolina and Wake Forest, Oklahoma State, Kentucky. So if any of those teams take an L, maybe ASU could move up into the top 10. But like you said, I think it'll probably still take a week or two. If they continue this winning streak, it'll probably still take a week or two before ASU could crack the top 10. But Donnie, it feels like we're feeling good about ASU right now at this point in the season. They're 5-1. They seem to be clicking both offensively and defensively. The ground attack is dominant. Their front 7 and back end has been pretty good as well. And as always, for that ASU versus Utah matchup, if you want more news, coverage, and insight on that game, a preview, if you want to know the best storylines heading into that game, well, you just got to go check out AllSunDevils AllSunDevils.com. I got a little choked up there talking about the website. That's how much I love it. AllSunDevils.com, where the staff will be working around the clock to bring you the best news and insight on all things Sun Devils.